Salutations, everyone. Welcome back to Victoria 3. I'm Lord Farns, and we are here with another country guide. This time, the great United States of America. Right now, basically easy mode for Victoria 3. We'll cover the country in multiple sections. I'll try and chapter them below so you can click on what you want to jump to. So, great nation, lots of fun. Actually, is probably the most or second most flavor events in the game, which is kind of cool. So let's jump right into it. The starting situation in the United States at the moment of the beginning of the game is you have very little military, but you are probably the largest and strongest nation in North America, with the exception of Great Britain lurking up here. The reason I mention Great Britain is because if Great Britain tries to fight a war with you early on, you'll probably lose. So just try not to annoy Great Britain. In fact, it's usually worth trying to become friends with them. Trade agreement, defensive pact, form alliance, if you can, will solve a lot of your problems in the long run. You start, thankfully, with a huge amount of colonies, finishing off the Native Americans in the Great Plains. Kind of just let it run. You might face one or two Indian revolts, Native American revolts, at which point raise your armies. You're going to need probably 10 troops at most to stop them from revolting, conquer them. That's the easy part. Now, the US has several other stuff that will pop up. The first one here is the slavery debate. Right now, your southern planters, which are your landholders, have a huge boost to political strength, and slavery is becoming a real problem in the US. Currently, getting rid of that law is pretty stupidly easy. Go in, reform your government, probably put the Whigs in power if need be. And you have to let other people join the Democratic Party. Go here. The odds of you getting slavery banned are pretty easy. Now, this comes with a caveat that the developers have already said they're going to make this a lot harder to ban slavery on. Right now, you can ban slavery in the first 5 years of the game. It's stupidly easy. And the odds of you seeing a civil war or an Afro-American uprising, almost zero. Now, they're going to change that so that the southern planters here either resist it more or have more political strength early on. Because right now, their political strength is surprisingly low, which means you're probably going to have to change other laws in order to weaken them. So let's talk about them. The big one here is local police force gives them a large political strength. You're going to want to try and change that to a dedicated police force, which more people like, to weaken their political strength. Outside of that, you're going to want to keep an eye on anything else that can weaken them. Obviously, slavery is a huge boost for them. That's the main problem you're going to see with them as well. If you can, try and kick them out of your government. Obviously, we're not going to do that here. And trying to suppress them will help a lot in terms of weakening their combat strength. On the other hand, once you get rid of slavery and you move towards slavery banned, they will lose the pro-slavery ideology, meaning if you can change the law, they won't be angry about it anymore. Which is kind of hilarious. I think that's probably going to change, but we'll see. Outside of that, otherwise, you're going to want to look at changing for the US is you might want to switch from a national militia to professional. It's not huge. You can still build quite a military. Local police force, as I said. Everything else is good. You may want to try and get either a healthcare system going early on because your population is slightly a limiting factor while playing them. Home affairs, National Guard is very important as well. Outside of that, there will be a couple other events that will occur. I'm hoping to trigger one here pretty quickly. Here we are. Worcester versus Georgia. Andrew Jackson defies the Supreme Court and orders the removal of the Cherokee to the Indian Territory. This is one of the darker things of U.S. history, and it's good they stuck it here because this will add the Indian removal, better known by most people as the Trail of Tears, which, if you're not from the U.S., basically the U.S. Army forced the Cherokee population to migrate out of this area to where modern-day Oklahoma is. And I don't know the exact number, but I think it was about half or more of the population died on the road due to starvation or exposure to the elements. And turns out it was illegal. At that point, it's never been really apologized for. No matter what your opinion is of taking the land, they should have treated them better on the march. There was no excuse for them dying. Now, the ways to solve this, you either get rid of colonial affairs, which you don't want to do as the U.S., you make sure Cherokee is not discriminated against, or they all migrate out of your territory. If you want to solve this problem where you don't cause the Trail of Tears, and it's hard to because it starts immediately, you want to do from racial segregation, you got to get to multiculturalism. And you can do a decent job. The key here is you've got to get rid of slavery first. Once you get rid of slavery, you can rush to get multiculturalism solved and solve the problem. Sadly, there's no real benefit towards either stopping or causing the Trail of Tears either way. It just kills off a lot of population and makes you not necessarily feel like a great person for killing them all off when they didn't need to. You'll also get several events that will fire periodically here about slavery. If you can change people to being more abolitionist, it will help. You'll get, I think you get John Brown's Bleeding Kansas, where you can force slavery to not be allowed in the western states, thereby weakening further the southern planters, the landholder estate. That is your big goal, is to ban slavery. If you don't ban slavery, it will cause trouble later on. It will arguments will stop being made by words and start being made by bullets. Pretty close to what the U.S. looks like right now in terms of its political situation. Other things to note. You have Texan statehood. Texas, right here, starts at war with Mexico. They will usually win this war here, or at least it will peace out. Take Texas, improve relations with them. Once the relationships get to 20 and they're at peace, they'll 95% of the time join the U.S. At this point in the game, Texas is an absolutely terrible province for you. The population's small, the GDP is terrible, the natural resources are okay. It's not till you get to the late game that Texas becomes really beneficial for the U.S. Outside of that, there is two other major ones. First off, there's the Transcontinental Railway, which you have to own a lot of land, build a railway across the country. It's a cool little historical thing. The big one here is the Oregon border dispute. You have an interest in the area already, even though it doesn't tell you this. Basically, you have to map the American western frontier, and then you have to map the Pacific Northwest area here. You have to complete the journey. It can take a couple times. There'll be several events that pop up. If you have the opportunity to build a fort, build one. If there's a mother and child along you, a reference to Sacagawea. I'm probably saying that wrong. You can get events where, what do you do with the mother and child? Take her to a settlement. Whenever you have an opportunity to either go hunting or find a settlement, try to find the settlement. In my opinion, it's almost never negative. And if you've got the woman and child with you, you'll get an event that gives you progress, lowers peril. If you have a chance to hunt a bear, the odds are I found you want to hunt the bear. There's a chance it goes wrong, but it's usually safe. Don't climb mountains. Don't go out at night. Avoid snowfalls. If native guides and Native Americans urge you not to do something, listen to them. It's probably the easiest expedition to complete. Once you do, you will have an event or a decision, or I forget which it is, that will appear. Basically, you'll negotiate, as long as you got good opinions with Great Britain, which is not hard to do. You will get into negotiation that will clarify the border here. You'll be given Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, at which point you'll still have to colonize this because the Columbia District doesn't. Basically, it gives you 3 provinces. It's quite nice. Outside of that, you're going to colonize your way up into the Iron Confederacy and into Canada probably. If you do get all the way to Manitoba, you'll actually stop Canada from being formed, which is kind of cool. I suspect the devs will change this because right now it totally ruins the very nice parallel line going here, which if you haven't seen, there are some hilarious videos out there about why this even exists. It's due to a lake. Yeah, it's quite interesting. Afterwards, you'll get another series of events that will pop up at some point. Basically, it will tell you the frontier wars against Mexico to be done. And basically what that is the US conquering this area from Mexico, including the rest of Texas. Mexico is honestly a joke compared to the US in terms of fighting. The downside is Mexico tends to ally people like Russia, who turn out to be a little bit harder to kill. So one thing, if you want to avoid that, is once you get some more interest, try and declare one in Russia itself, even taking one out of Hudson Bay type area and putting it in Russia or Great Britain or whatever, just so you can talk to them. Get Russia happy with you. They tend not to join the war. One-on-one, you beat Mexico. If a great power joins, the best you're probably going to get is a white peace, at least till like 1890 or so. It's hard. And that's fine, because this is not a war game. You really don't need to be doing mass conquest. It hurts your economy in the long run. Be aware, though, of mobilizing too many troops to the front lines if Mexico appears to be worried or fearful. If you muster too many troops or have too many allies, they'll just back down and give you one or more provinces. The devs are going to change that, so you'll be able to take more lands. But right now, it's crippling if you only get one province rather than the 4 or 5 or 6 you need. Make sure that when you start the war, you actually set up the war goals. Most people miss that. At the initial phase, you can add more war goals at the cost of maneuvers. Don't wait. You're going to want to build more troops, some more barracks before the war with Mexico. You're stronger than them, but right at the beginning, they have equivalent troops, and it's just not worth it. Have more. Even think about doing a naval invasion down here, Yucatan or Veracruz, and flanking them. If you do, it's a lot easier to win. But you should have superior military tech by the time you go to war with them. You already have access to skirmish infantry. They don't really have anything that can stop you. The issue is really allies or defensive pacts. Outside of that, you can, if you want to, expand your custom unions south and actually kind of take over this area. It's honestly almost easier to do it militarily. At some point, you'll be able to survey the Panama Isthmus and buy the Panama Canal area and build it. And it'll give you some land down there. It's similar to the Suez Canal event up here. It's a neat historical event. It's not overwhelmingly game-changing. It just speeds up your Navy's passage from continent to continent. Make sure you accept the Manifest Destiny and stuff here. You have to research nationalism, but this will give you those claims on Mexico, basically. And make sure you do return state rather than conquer state. Even though you never own them, the game will give you the fact that you should be able to take them back naturally. Now, outside of all of that, you'll very quickly colonize this area. Afterwards, you want to colonize Africa. Yes, you can colonize Argentina and stuff if you want to, but the reality is Africa is the big prize. And if you haven't seen my colonization video, go watch that. But basically, colonize Sahari up there. Try and get here in South Cameroon area. Make sure that you research the anti-malaria protection technologies, and until they solve the malaria problem, once you get malaria, reload the game, or malaria prevention technologies, reload the game, and that will remove malaria from your colonies. Otherwise, the game is glitched and doesn't do it right now. You can also colonize your area over here in Indonesia and Papua New Guinea and New Zealand. It's all cool to do so. The biggest issue you're going to have for the US with resources is rubber, which you can solve to some degree in Africa. or, and I haven't figured out an easy way to solve it, is opium. You need opium for the higher level medical technologies, and there's really no easy way to gain opium because it's got such a limited area in which you can build it. It might be worth launching an invasion or setting like an interest in China to trade for opium if you can. Late game. Otherwise, you're stuck without medical technology, which just kind of sucks. Okay, let's talk about technology for the US, and then we'll probably move on to the actual economy, which is probably why you're all here. So, in terms of technology, the US has decent innovation. You're going to want to build more universities in New York, Kentucky, and Massachusetts, which is to get the throughput bonuses. You start off with decent technology. I'd say you're not on par with Great Britain in terms of tech, but you're pretty close behind, which is quite nice. The only thing you're really going to need to focus on for some time is your production tree. The US has virtually every resource you can need and the capacity to build them to high levels. The only thing you're lacking, and I will point this out, is some of your states out here's population is small, meaning unlike nations like China or others, you can't build your iron mines to like 40 or 50 and still have the population to actually work them all. As great as it is to centralize everything on the East Coast, which is where most of your population and resources are early on until you take over this area, you're going to have to spread out and be less centralized than you would like. The biggest culprit for your population problems is DC. You have this lovely White House building, which increases your government admin throughput by 20%, kind of equivalent to the skyscraper modifier. If you could put your skyscraper here, it'd be wonderful. The downside is there's just no population in DC. It's got 121K. It's not going to grow much. It has basically no natural good resources. And yes, you can build this government admin high. The problem is you won't have the population to staff it for some time. The best solution I've come across for the DC population issue is to throw down level 1 on all the resources at some point, and then just max out your government admin as high as you can and hope you get a migration. Going in and throwing down a greener grass campaign on DC will help as the most. You'll get huge waves of migration because you're so open to other cultures and religions that at some point your population problem will be solved. In New York, in particular, you can build the Statue of Liberty, which will increase migration attraction, which is quite cool, as well as give you a prestige bonus. When you get it, you can build it. It's kind of cool building it in DC to be historically accurate. You'll get a huge amount of population in these areas over time. Just make sure you have the factories and stuff to support them when they come, but otherwise, don't over-centralize. It's far too easy to run out of population in these states. And in terms of where your economic engine is, it varies on where your population is. Early on, you have access to New York here, which already has a decent industry, but Pennsylvania is the big key. Pennsylvania, Virginia, and the like have iron mines. If you're going to do the economic dominance, you're going for that. Journal entries. It's going to want you to build up iron mines. It varies where they want you to build it. Sometimes it's like Connecticut, sometimes it's Pennsylvania, etc. Suffice to say, Pennsylvania is a huge prize here. It has massive coal mines, which is historically accurate. It also has good amounts of iron. Honestly, Pennsylvania is great because it also has a population to support it. What you can do, though, is if you want to, turn Virginia here into iron or coal, put Pennsylvania on another one of the resources just to make sure you don't exceed the population. There are other mines as you go further down here. Tennessee's got some iron, as does Kentucky and West Virginia. The problem is the population. The further west you go, the less population you have at the start. Although, to be fair, places like Rhode Island don't have a lot of population either, but they don't have mines. Turn this area right here into your industrial complex. Pick a state, build iron mines in it. Pick another state, build coals. Pick another state, build tools. I would tend to recommend you don't turn New York or Pennsylvania into your tools factory, mainly because you're going to want to build mines and stuff there. And in New York, you definitely want to get these whaling stuff because early game oil is nice. Pick a state down here that doesn't have as many mines, but still has decent population. South Carolina, North Carolina are decent choices. North Carolina does have some coal. That's where you're going to want to put your tool workshops. Maryland also kind of works. Focus on your population centers. Get the tools, get the iron, get the coal. Start building tools probably first. So build like 1 or 2 construction factories, construction sectors. Build probably 2 tool mines, build 2 iron mines, tool, iron, tool, iron, tool, iron. Once you got about 10 or so of those, start building some coal. Then just keep building those for a while. It's the strongest economic engine you can have. If you start running across money problems outside of that, take a detour and build some natural resources. You're going to hit a point, probably I'd say around 400 construction, so quite a ways down the line, where you'll start being able to build up the rest of your land. Definitely go through, build level 1 of every resource you can. Or if you want, from the beginning of the game, you can do 1 of every resource. It's just faster if you focus on what is your goods that are used in construction. So keeping your iron, coal, and tools cheap will keep building your industry up. Don't neglect logging. The US has these lovely chestnut forests, which give you a huge amount of hardwood output, which means let's see if I can find where they are. You've got furniture makers here, which require hardwood and stuff. The US's furniture manufacturers can easily be the best in the world with those 25% hardwood modifiers for most of the game. Meaning, if you've got spare time and resources, upgrading your furniture manufacturers is a really good idea to generate money. Try to stick it in a state outside of New York, which has natural like mines and stuff you're going to want to use. Stick it in some of these provinces that you're less likely to build high mines in, and it'll also give them income. Don't forget your railroads. You can very quickly exceed the infrastructure usage here. New York in particular, you want to reserve some space for late game so you can hit the Niagara Falls electricity output bonus. This is where you want to build your power plants when you get them. Is New York first, everywhere else second. Just 20% output is huge. Combine it with a throughput bonus, you'll easily generate the power you need. You'll just have to build like level 80 power plants in New York. If you want to be historical, you can stick your motor industry over near Chicago and stuff for the fun of that. And the US has lots of bonuses here, some of which are more or less useful as you go along. The Appalachian Mountain area here has the coal bonuses, so stick your coal mines in these areas. It's just kind of neat, all these little bonuses that exist. The chestnut forests are huge for the US. You can kind of, if you hover over them, most people don't know, you can actually see where the modifiers spread to. It's kind of neat. Once you get to the Great Plains, you get a huge agricultural output here in these 4 states. So definitely consider focusing on them. And I can't give you too much advice beyond that in terms of your economy. You'll get coal, iron, tools. Later on, build steels. The game here will ask you to, if you're pursuing economic dominance, once you do iron mines, it'll ask you to build steel mines. Don't build them super early. It's not worth the time or money when you're not using steel. But make sure that once you do build steel mines, you build them to like level 20 or 30, because you're going to need that as the game progresses. Make sure that you've got all your modern production techniques going. Wine vineyards here is particularly good. Make sure you definitely get the soil-enriched farming and grazing. It makes a world of difference. And at some point, turn on automatic expansion on all your buildings. Don't forget that once you build railroads, they're under development, and you want to do automatic rail expansion, and they also start subsidized, which can be dangerous. And the last thing, make sure you up your taxation level. The US starts with low taxation. There's no reason to stay at that point. And you'll take tons of money, everything else. Tech, production, followed by society, followed by military. You're going to have some bureaucracy problems, especially as you go west. Be aware that several of your states are not states yet, so it is worth going through and incorporating them, especially as you spread west. Neglecting to do that will absolutely cripple your economy. Just make sure that you do build up your government building in DC, and you'll probably have to build it elsewhere just because you don't have the population in DC. This is probably the most annoying thing about playing the US is you have this great government admin building and you have no population to work it. Definitely get Africa, definitely get rubber plantations in Cameroon area, and that'll solve most of your trouble. Opium, British, Chinese, is probably where you're going to be able to buy it from the best. And good luck stomping Mexico. Once you beat Mexico and the like, you should probably be the largest nation in the game, or at least close to it. Build up your army. If you want, you can go conquer Canada. At some point, you can negotiate the Alaska purchase once your GDP is 60 million, which is easy. The downside is I've never yet seen Russia go to default or take loans. If you do, you buy Alaska. Kind of cool. And then at that point, you're basically the US size. There'll be an event later on where you can interfere in Hawaii, meaning at some point you're going to want to declare an interest here so that you can intervene with their whole succession stuff. Cool little Easter egg for the US is every time you add a state, the number of stars on your flag goes up. And there is, in fact, an achievement here. I haven't bothered to unlock it. I'm right on the edge of doing so. Is you have to have 100 incorporated states. The easiest way to do this is, first off, take over the North American lands you'll normally do, Hawaii, Alaska. That'll get you 50 or so. At some point, you'll be able to get the Indian territory. Down here, Africa is where you're going to get the other 50 or so states, unless you go invade Central America. If you colonize all this area up here, start up here, conquer these guys. If you need to, rush over here. Even if you get a single province in the colonial state, you can make it a state, meaning stuff like even a single province up here in North New Zealand is worth it. Also, don't forget that a lot of this area out here is colonizable. You can build colonies out here. It's very cheap and easy to colonize, and might be worth taking a detour to there early on just to get like 10 or 20 states just from tiny little islands. They count as states. Every single one counts as a state. It's quite cool. And have fun. The US can easily become one of the strongest nations in the game early on. The limiting factor is truly population. Once you solve that issue, the world's your oyster. You can easily invade China. You could avenge the War of 1812, which is 24 years old at this point, and stomp Great Britain. Conquering Canada is honestly a joke so long as you can take out Great Britain. So anyway, that's the US. They've got a lot of interesting flavor. I wish more nations had that. The downside is once you conquer Mexico and solve Oregon and buy Alaska, you really have no other long-term goals, meaning you can go wherever you like, but it's also a little bit disappointing. It's very easy to complete the economics dominance as the US. Hitting 1 billion GDP is not that big of a struggle. And anyway, hopefully that helps you guys play the US. Very fun, very easy. Solve slavery, weaken the landholders. Try not to trigger the Civil War. There's no benefit to playing the Confederacy. They're actually much worse than the US without slavery. Slavery right now is terrible. There's no reason to have slaves or serfs in this game. And best of luck. The US starts off with the great laws that reduce tension. So if you play it right, the odds of you having revolts and rebellions are lower compared to other nations. So see you guys another time. If you liked, like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you all in another Let's Play video. Bye for now.